Hello and welcome to the I Create Daily podcast. I'm Leora Alderson.
And I'm Devani Alderson. We are the mother-daughter co-founders of the I Create Daily brand.
We are passionate about encouraging positivity, creativity, and productivity while bringing you information and resources that support your creative aspirations.
I Create Daily is for creators in every genre of creating, from musicians to writers, crafters to inventors, bloggers to entrepreneurs. So if you're into creating anything, this podcast has something for you.
So tell us, what would support you most in your journey? You can reach us at creators@icreatedaily.com.
Thank you for joining us on this journey.
Hello and welcome to the I Create Daily podcast, a movement for creators serious about their work. I'm Leora.
And I'm Devani, and today our guest is Athena Demetrios, a spiritual intuitive, medium, and channel, author, and teacher. After growing up in abject poverty in a dysfunctional, alcoholic environment and being terrorized by a boarder who lived in the root cellar, Athena Demetrios repressed her traumatic memories, which thrust her into a downward spiral of melancholy and despair. But when, as an adult, she had a powerful spiritual experience that opened doors into other dimensions, she began an odyssey in which truth became stranger than fiction, a journey through hypnotic regression that led her to transcendence and healing. Athena maintained a successful career in the film industry as a makeup artist while exploring the world of the unseen. Her sensitivity as a psychic began to accelerate when a powerful spiritual experience opened doors into other dimensions. We're really excited to hear about the worlds you've explored.
Yes, your story. It's fantastic. And to start, we want to hear your origin story, but also, and sorry, I didn't give you a chance to say thank you.
I appreciate that wonderful intro. Thank you so much. So I'm going to turn that back to you.
Well, what struck me is that what a contrast, right? Doing, beautifying the external world, the physicality of the Hollywood stars, living in that facade kind of a world, that's glamorous and it's all about the external mostly. And then yet undertaking this inner world journey. So start wherever in your story, that works best for you.
All right. Well, it was a very dysfunctional childhood, to say the least. However, let me preface this with saying that my mother, bless her heart, just simply couldn't cope. There was a lot of wealth, and there was alcoholism, and there was compulsive gambling. And so my father lost an inheritance, and it would have been worth up into the millions. And my mother simply couldn't cope. She had 7 kids to raise. She, bless her heart, she always opened our doors to other kids that needed a place to stay. She was never abusive. She just went into somewhat of a state of denial, I think, with the loss of so much. It was just so much wealth, and my father was never around, so he left, and my mother took in a boarder, kind of like under the guise of, a boyfriend. He lived in the root cellar, and he was there for over a period of about a year, and between 6 and 7, it was when I was repeatedly raped by him. And I repressed the memories because I always say, kids are going to do whatever they have to do to survive. So much of my childhood, sincerely, was just like being caught in a fog. Everything was extremely foggy. And my siblings had memories of things I didn't, and they would often say, "Don't you remember?" And I'd say, "No, I don't remember." And they'd say, "Come on, you remember." But I really didn't. But then I have almost a photographic memory with other things. Very strange. And I always say what to leave in and what to leave out and why, right?
Yeah.
And because when I think anybody experiences something like that, I think you do what you have to do as a child to cope and survive. It wasn't that we didn't have fun. we were like a bunch of wild hooligans running around the neighborhood. Wild, I mean, we really were, because she was working all the time. And then there were a couple of other events that transpired. She lost the house for just the mortgage payment left. And we moved into another home, and the landlord set our house on fire and poisoned our dog. And we had gone off working in the bean fields. And so when we came back, we moved to California. And that was, to me, that was kind of like the height of the poverty. And then when I was around 13, we moved to Chico. And oh my God, coming into this town, because it was so green, so beautiful. I see the greenery behind you, and it was very much like that. It's actually known as the City of Trees. It was very, very green. It's very beautiful. And I just felt like we had been kind of released from the clutches of some dark force when we entered this town. And during my teenage years, I had some other events that started to transpire, mystical, that I always call it like a bleed through from another life. Some of my mediumship qualities started coming through. So my father, the night that we had buried him, he appeared in the doorway, and I see spirit very, very clearly. I don't see them like a wispy apparition. I always say I seem like Patrick Swayze in Ghost.
Yeah.
I see that clearly. And suffice it to say, as I grew into my teenage years, I became very removed. And although outwardly people would think I was sociable, but I was really inwardly shy, I would say, and very, very suicidal. But that was the repressed memories.
Right.
So suffice it to say, when I had a daughter out of wedlock when I was 17, and kept her. And so when I was, it was 1979, became a workaholic. I worked for Revlon and worked for them for quite some time. But it was the one area where I could find success in my life. And I never did turn to drugs or alcohol. Thank God. I think I had a healthy fear of that, because I think I would have known on some level it would have taken me down.
Yeah.
Had I done that, so there, but for the grace of God, go I.
Right.
And then I was living in Los Angeles, 1979. There was a series of 3 events that pretty much brought me to my knees. And I always say, I think in life that we have maybe a place that we reach where we don't have an inch or even a half an inch or a fourth of an inch to turn. We have to face ourselves. And that was a defining moment in me. When that transpired, then everything in my life turned upside down. I took off psychically like a rocket ship. I had so many mystical events around that time. Suffice it to say, there was a golden ray that came into my front room and dusted everything with gold. I had no idea what in God's name was going on. I really didn't. And what was actually happening was that I was being awakened by the Ascended Master Saint Germain. And it was some years later that I read that the color of love from an Ascended Master, their ray is gold. And so that, and on some level, I knew I was being tested, but I was not spiritually awake on any level prior to that. And I found myself entering into another dimension, seeing my father that I hadn't seen since he had died, but I always say it was more real than me sitting here talking to you two. It was just, you couldn't explain how beautiful it was. And the energy was just moving in this place that he was. It was very green, very gorgeous, but you could just see the energy. It was alive. You could see it. It was transparent. It was glistening. It was so vivid. And he came up and he held me, and there was all this white light that flooded from my father through my heart. And years later, when I was under in hypnosis, what he was saying to me is, you have to go back. It's not your time. And he says, you're going to come into your power as a spirit. continue to pray. It's going to be given to you. And then shortly after that, someone that I had just barely met, but oh my God, I felt like I had known them for lifetimes. Very special presence about them. And he handed me 3 books. And that was the Teachings by Saint Germain. And I just cried like a baby because it was everything I felt in my heart, but I could never find outwardly through organized religion. Not that I sought that prior, but I just, fear, hell, and damnation, no, that's not the God, if there was one that I related to at all. But it would have, and so it completely transformed my life. That was 40 years ago.
So about how old were you at that time?
I was 32 years old. I was 32, when all of that transpired. And again, I had, at the time, I had no idea what was transpiring. But what I did have an epiphany, and this was the defining moment right before that golden ray came into my front room, was that I just remember having this epiphany that life had no choice but to come back to me so that I would experience what I had been putting other people through. It was the only way I was going to learn the cause of what I was doing and the effect it was having on the rest of life. Makes sense, right? And with that one epiphany, that's when I remember saying out loud, oh my God, I understand. So that was within a split second, and then that golden ray came in and dusted everything with gold. So that was such a beautiful and mystical moment. And then, of course, after that, then I began the study, and I've been a student of the Ascended Master Teachings for about 40 years.
So when you had that experience, it's like, was that like in your bio, I think it talked about in your darkest hours is when that experience came to you. So were you like lamenting on the floor of your front room, or what was going on in your life? Because the other part of this question has to do with just what comes to mind with the inner and outer experiences and the conflicts and the suppressed memories is that there has to be a lot of chaos and confusion and tumultuousness in your life.
Oh, that's putting it mildly. We'll underscore that about 4 times.
Right.
Yeah, it had been. I mean, I had a series of, my relationships were pretty much self-destructive. I wouldn't let anybody close, even including my daughter, which we have a very good relationship now, thank you God.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course, she's had all these years now of knowing me conscious. But I just had guarded my heart. Now, I had no idea. I had not done any of the work with going back and beginning to deal with any of those memories. I hadn't done any of that work. That was to come a little bit later down the pike. But up to that point, it was very, very tumultuous. And like I said, there were 3 events, and I go into those. Certainly, all of this is in the book in great depth and detail. And it was when these 3 events brought me to my knees, literally. And I just remember praying from such a deep heart, because I had never believed in God, not organized, or that hell and damnation, sitting in a throne with a long white beard, never felt right.
Right.
So when that happened and I got to my knees, I said, I don't know if you really exist. I don't even know if you're out there, but if you are, you have to be every word that comes out of my mouth and help me reach my daughter. And that was the prayer. Wow. Even it's still, I still get emotional about it, because looking back, what a beautiful and defining moment in my life.
Yes.
How can I look at that as anything but a phenomenal blessing?
Right.
Now, right?
So from there, then you had this incredible experience. Where in that did you receive the books, those 3 books as a gift, and how long between that experience to beginning to anchor?
Okay, that was probably I would say it was probably around 3 weeks or a month, because I remember that I was using a prayer, "The Lord is my shepherd." That was the one that I knew, and I kind of chanted that like I was in an insane asylum, really. I just kind of chanted nonstop with that. And it was after that. That was so fascinating, because on some level I knew I was being tested. I didn't understand it, but I knew I was being tested, and it truly was. It was an initiation, looking back on it now. And also segueing back to that experience with my father, seeing him, and this was prior to me getting those books. Years later, when I was under hypnosis, I recalled that whole experience with my father spontaneously, and recalled the conversation. And that's when he said, "You have to go back and be in the body." He says, "You're going to come into your power as a real spirit. Continue to pray. It's going to be given to you. Continue to pray." And that's what he had said to me when I was on the other side with him. And so those books, when I opened it up, I broke down. I just cried. I knew it was everything I felt in my heart, but I could not find outwardly. And what I so connected with was that Saint Germain was saying that life in all activities everywhere manifest as God in action. And that it was only through mankind's ignorance and his lack of understanding that that pure essence of life is constantly interrupted. For if it were allowed to flow on its way undisturbed, we would experience peace, love, and harmony, for that was the natural state of life. But given the ability to qualify it through our free will, we are constantly requalifying the energy, which is pure and perfect. But it comes forth with anger, lack, limitation, you name it. And to me, that made complete sense. And so that was the defining moment for me. And I knew for myself, I had the tools to go home. And I do believe with all my heart that I feel like we all have a longing and a desire to connect with that greater presence, the source of all life, God, Goddess, all that is, whatever you want to call it. But I believe that that is innate. And I think that's that pull within all of us that another person can't fill. I think that's the longing to become one with that presence again.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of boring. I'm sticking to it.
I'm sorry. What was the last thing?
No, I said that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Okay, absolutely. Well,
yeah, it just. Oh my God, it's just transformed every area of my life. So it's been applying what he teaches in those books, because he basically said that if we don't know where to anchor our attention to, that the human self will take absolute control, and we're seeing the results of it now in the world.
Definitely. So one of the things that we know that many people in our audience have their own traumatic childhood stories. In fact, most traumatic stories often occur in childhood or through, school or teachers or whatever have you, abuse. And yet not all of them have that kind of descended light, ascended master kind of experience. And yet most of them perhaps get a sense that maybe they're being tested for something, for their strength, for what they can endure, and for who they become on the other side of that. I guess in a way, so I would imagine it like if I see a beautiful sunset, I'm not a visual artist, so I cannot replicate that and paint it, whereas a visual artist can. So you had that traumatic experience, and what came forth for you was a spiritual initiation as a part of it. For what is it? So in order, and like I think many people can tie in, like I said, with the concept of being tested or going through an initiation. What do you think the test was about, and why did it have to be such a horrendous thing for you as a child?
That's an interesting question, because I also, and again, this is a very touchy area, because when you get into anything with karma or past lives, that is such a personal journey, for people. But for myself, I was born wanting to know, why am I here? What's it all about? And what and who is God? I was born that way. And I believe that those experiences, that the trauma, it had an origin. I know it had an origin, a previous origin. And I think there were also tremendous judgments on some level that I had made, perhaps on myself. For years, I felt like I was being punished when I began to wake up a little bit. Let's put it that way, or I felt like the biggest victim in the world, understandably so. And I understand that when people feel that, but I've been able to transform that now and find forgiveness from the heart and not the head. Big difference. From the heart and not the head. And again, it's an interesting question, and it's a hard one because everybody's journey is so different, and whatever experiences that they have gleaned or have brought them to this point of awareness. If I could give any advice to any, not that people really listen to advice, but if I could share something with the listening audience, is that, and I'm going to share something right now that just came to mind that was shared with me by a guide.
Okay.
And it was at one of the darkest moments for me. And so whoever's listening, I want you to put your name right where I'm saying mine, but I want you to put your name there. And it was, what was shared with me is, Athena, you are a light bearer. And as you step forward with your gift of light to the world, first you must know the darkness and the shadows of your own. And in knowing the same, you will find the desire to honor and to kneel before those dark places, but to see them as beautiful and divine because of your willingness to transform through that darkness into the light.
Wow.
Wasn't that beautiful?
That was incredible. Yeah.
Yes. And so I always love to share that because I feel that anybody that has experienced trauma, whether that is physical abuse or sexual abuse or domestic violence, whatever that is, and if there is part of you, and I know there is, that knows that life isn't meant to be lived that way, well, that's the presence within you that is shining that light there.
Yes.
And if you choose to explore healing, and a lot of times, if people are feeling nudged and pulled, to explore healing, and I'm going to say it's not a journey for the weak. It just isn't. Trust in your intuition that you will find a good qualified therapist, because healing, from my experience, doesn't come in a download. It's going to come through having someone help guide you through that storm. And it doesn't mean you're not going to cry and you're not going to have anger. You're not going to have some rage. Those are all parts of a process of healing. Let them be, because you'll move through them. And each phase is very, very important. And I always say, I'm out here swinging the lantern for anyone in the night, saying you can get through this.
Yeah.
And one of the things, in my book, Walking Between Worlds, and I have been, people have been reaching out to me that I just had a phone call yesterday that, oh my God, it's like, okay, I know I'm going to get through it now.
Yes.
So there's a lot they will identify with, and certainly tools that I use that may be helpful.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So while this was going on and you were around 32, 33, you were still working as a makeup artist for Hollywood, in Hollywood, right?
Well, I had worked, what had happened was I was working for Revlon, okay, and I had worked for them for, several years. And then my real desire was to be a makeup artist. So around all of that time, I left Revlon and then went to work in the industry, the film industry. That was always my dream, my passion. And I always say if people follow their heart, if they follow their passion, follow the excitement, the universe has a way of opening up that door. So don't give up on a dream. Do not do that.
Yes.
Follow what's exciting you the most, and that will lead you to the next step, which is, I think, great advice that someone had shared with me one time, and it's so true. But I was developing that relationship with, I was doing some film, and then I really concentrated on commercials. I did print work as well, but then I concentrated on commercials so they were shorter in duration, the pay was great, and, and then I could be home and not have to be on location.
Right.
So, and then a little later down the road was when I started to do the work with Dr. Slavin to go back and regain the memories. And I also want to say that I recorded, something told me way back then to record those sessions.
Ah, fantastic.
So those sessions are in the book. I don't color it. I don't make it more than what it was. I could pull the tapes out and you could follow them like a bouncing ball.
Yeah, fantastic.
So, yes. So
and were those sessions before or after the experience of golden light in your home?
Oh no, that was after.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
That's right.
was after.
Yeah.
And then I became a channel for Dr. Peebles, J.M. Peebles, and I became.
No, tell us. Like most people may not know. For those who don't know about
what
J.M.
channeling is.
Yeah. Well, yes, because in your bio it's mentioned medium and channel. So maybe you could describe a little bit about each of those and how it works with you.
Well, I think my mediumship works a little bit different, I think, in some ways. I see spirit and I help them cross over. Okay, that I get an electrical current that goes through my body, and I call it the doorbell ringing. Because everything in the universe is made up with frequency, energy, vibration, right?
Yeah.
So when I get that vibration that goes through me, it's like an electrical current. I think, ooh, spirit's here. And so then I will see them. And many times, they'll appear sometimes if they want to give a message to somebody. They'll appear if they need help in crossing over. I remember I was back east or in the southern states and saw a Confederate soldier standing, in a graveyard and looked like he was in shock, and cars going by and a 7-Eleven across the street. How bizarre was that, right?
Right.
So stopped and helped him cross over. It doesn't serve them to be here.
Right.
Many times if they leave in a traumatic way, then they feel a little bit stuck, or there can be certain reasons or attachments sometimes, or sometimes they just don't know they have transitioned.
Right. So how did you, like the movie Sixth Sense, how did you get into that aspect of mediumship? How did that develop?
Well, it was in 1982, and I was listening on the radio to a show called Open Mind, and somebody says, you got to hear this. This is, there's this guy who is channeling this character named Dr. Peebles. And when I heard Dr. Peebles, I heard his voice, I became electrified. It was like every cell in my body woke up. Like I knew him. And interesting enough, then I thought to myself, oh God, I'd love to have a reading by this guy, because I loved the answers that he gave to people and his wisdom and his humor. So the next day I was working on a commercial, and I had this wonderful rapport with this actor. We were talking about metaphysics, and he says, I just had the most incredible reading with this character named Dr. Peebles. That was the next day. Right? So there you go. So I contacted his medium, And suffice it to say, I ended up, and Dr. Peoples, had told me, you were a medium. I knew you before, and he wanted to come through me. So I've been channeling him probably 28 years. I studied because channeling does take, I believe, study. I think there's a lot of integrity that's very important with this kind of work.
Yes.
And, it's not like psychic prediction by any means. He works very strongly through me on past life, with people. Sometimes there's issues, stumbling blocks, that somebody may come up with over and over again, or they react the same way. That's usually tied to another lifetime, as a rule. And so the mediumship, there's different kinds of mediumship. I hear messages as well. And channeling is just opening myself up. Really, it's for more love, more guidance, and his joy is sharing that with people. That's his joy.
Mm.
That's part of my joy too, is to be able to connect with people that way and be of service or assistance.
Definitely.
Who are the type of people who let me put the question right.
That's okay.
Who is who is channeling good for, and how do they who are the type of people you work with when you do the channeling with people, and
okay, I'm sorry.
And at what stage should people consider something like that?
Well, I think first of all, if somebody's feeling pulled, I always say if you're feeling nudged, in a situation like that, a lot of people, and anymore, that veil is becoming so much thinner because our help from spirit is so much more accessible.
Mm.
We all have guides that work with us. Even the smallest plant or leaf or piece of grass, as the doc says, has a spirit guide, because it's really about love and about being of assistance and lifting up. It really is. It's about lifting up life more and more, and to empower. And so there's people that have been seers or mediums or clairvoyants in other lives, and so many times that's somewhat a natural ability that they may have. Now, usually what happens is one's life there'll be certain events that will transpire, and then all of a sudden, like me listening to Dr. Peoples on the radio that night, and then it's kind of like, and I'm going to knock here, it's kind of like knocking the door, right?
Right.
Remember that you made this agreement in spirit, and do you still want to keep that?
Mm.
So there's usually an agreement that's made on some level before one comes into, I would say, a little bit more blatant contact. Sometimes people will have dreams, and they'll have a dream of maybe meeting with maybe a spirit guide, or they'll have a little recollection, or it'll be kind of, what was that about, kind of thing, or that kind of feeling. And so people that really are interested in spiritual growth, that's one of the avenues, because it really is opening up to more love and developing more of your own sensitivities, to you're sharpening your intuition. I think that's been all part of the path for me, for sure. And so when my phone rings or people contact me, and they can always reach me through my site, which is iamwithin.com. And so there's a whole thing in there about the doc. They can read about him. But when people contact me, usually they are going through a lot of transition, and there's a lot going on, or they can be at a crossroads, or they feel stuck, or they feel lost. That's usually when I get the call. I always say that the dance begins on the other side before they contact me physically.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, definitely. Athena, you mentioned that when hearing Dr. Peoples' voice, and then hearing about him having given a reading to someone the next day. So he was living then, and you met him in person, correct?
No, he's on the spirit side.
So he's always
he's on the spirit side, but This is very funny. I had asked him one time, and this was through his other medium that he was coming through at that time. I said, "Did I know you before?"
I,
And he says, and he's got this accent. He says, "Well," he says, "we knew this was going to come up sooner or later."
yeah.
He said, "I'll tell you this." He said, "I knew you well. You were not in my peripheral vision. We worked together on several projects. Your name was Mary. You were a medium through and through. I love you very much. You are as a sister to me, and you're going to be exploring this later on down the road. That's all we're going to tell you."
I see.
Okay, so that did lead me to documentation of my past life with Dr. Peebles as a spiritualist in Boston and then through the New England states, which also explained why I had this pull to the New England states and the turn of the century, but our names are all over the place together, and the name back then was Mary Longley.
Well, what fun to go back and see sort of like as a different kind of genealogy, right? To go into.
Well, it's funny. She had the funkiest little old hairdo, that little old Gibson girl hairdo. And I said, now I know why I became a hairdresser. But yeah, a lot of the similarities. And, there was a book with her bio. I call her Shy, She and I. And I always say, the most fascinating thing about that whole era with me and Dr. Peebles is that I could have stood at the port of Ellis Island as a 60-year-old woman and had a conversation with my father in the same century when he got off the boat from Greece. Isn't that a trip when you think about it?
Oh, yes, definitely.
And I could have said, in this century, you're going to be my father.
Yes.
And then, yeah.
You never know.
There's documentation of Dr. Peebles in the back of the book where he gives a testimonial in one of the books Mary wrote. She was a medium. And then Banner of Light, they worked together. And I just got tired, basically, of kind of printing out all the articles. But there's very physical evidence of our life together and pictures.
So one of the things that, so back to your mediumships. Now, you're talking about channeling, and that is you open yourself to the voice and wisdom of another entity. And then there's mediumship.
Or it can be your higher self as well.
Or your higher self, good point, which was going to be part of my next questions. But first, getting back to the mediumship and how it is that you came to work with helping people helping souls pass from being sort of stuck closely with the physical plane to the next place where they need to go. How did you?
Well, seeing my father, and of course, and again, that was my first encounter seeing him. Now, my mother saw him the same night, but we didn't talk, about it for a year. And incidentally, I have to say that about 2 months ago, my father appeared to me here, and he was so physical. And I see spirit, but he was as physical as you, or looking through the camera right now and seeing you. I could feel the weight of his hands in my hand. I could feel the warmth of his body, and he hugged me again. And I was so excited because I hadn't seen him since I was 32 with that. So I think that opened up. I think that opened up something in my consciousness. What it did when I was that young teenager, the night that we had buried him and he appeared, was it left me with a feeling there has to be something after death, because I didn't believe in anything. But he appeared to me, so he had to be there. Right. So that opened up a doorway. And then I remember having another very mystical experience around the same time. I remember looking in a mirror and I saw a friend's father, and I just saw all this gray around him, and I thought, I think he's getting ready to die. And and he had passed maybe 3 days later. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand any of that. So when spirit, when I took off psychically like a rocket ship, I don't know how else to say it, accelerated like crazy. And
In
so,
what way? What does that look like when you
Yeah.
accelerate like crazy? You start seeing all kinds of things through the
well,
veil?
I see, and then I became incredibly sensitive as, as a psychic, I guess you would say.
Started hearing people's thoughts or knowing what was
Oh
going to
yeah, yeah.
happen?
Yes, things like that. I mean, for sure, but it was just all of these sensitivities were just being quickened and, waking up. And there's ways that people can develop those, because I honestly think that it is a natural state. It's a natural evolution for us to be sensitive. And I think it is more abnormal. I don't want to call anyone abnormal, but I think we shut that down. And so I think it's opening all of that up again.
Yeah.
And I feel like the more conscious we become and the more sensitive we become at the same time, and especially if someone has an interest in that, and there are classes that you can take, the really wonderful teachers out there that can help guide you through that process. And many times it's just wonderful to be in a class with people of like mind, because you feel like, oh my gosh, this person understands me.
Right.
They completely get me.
Is that something you help people do? Help them develop more of their spiritual awakening, I suppose?
I do. Yes, I do. I do that a lot with Saint Germain and those teachings. And, that's probably my greatest joy, is to inspire people in such a way where they make that connection with the light that they truly are. And once they can start getting some footing with that, and it's affirmations are a very big part of that, because one of the things that he teaches is when you use the two words I or I am, it's really what follows all of that. So if you're saying you're sick, you're broke, this or that, you're creating that to come back into your world.
Right.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. That's a lot of what we talk about and write about with I Create Daily, is that we create the life we want to live one day at a time through the words that we say and write and think and what we do in the world each day.
Yes, and it's so true. And so that's a big part, and that's been the largest part of what my transformation has been. And I think we all have, and Dr. Peoples calls it, I'm going to dovetail here with the doc, as I call him, we all have illusions of separation that keep us from knowing the God self. Okay, we all have that. And for everybody, it's different. It's like you may have honed these wonderful gifts that you've brought forward into this lifetime that I am still reaching to be able to glean and to understand and to have that really deep acknowledgement of that. So everybody's on a different rung of the ladder. It's not to say that no one is better than anybody else. They're just different rungs of the ladder. And it's like Saint Germain says, no two students are alike.
Yeah.
No two students are alike. And so they work with students in a very, very beautiful and private way. We wouldn't be having this conversation right now, I'm sure, if you weren't on some level under his umbrella of love. And because it's always an individual's light and their inner strength. And, that's where, that connection. And that's who we really are. Yeah. So everything else, and the shadows just give way to the light.
Yes.
Really do.
Absolutely. I love that. We'll definitely put that into a quote. Let's get back for a moment, because I love that you said the channeling could also be your higher self, from your soul, your monad, your spirit. So, because that was prior to your saying that, my next question was going to be, one of the problems I have seen or could imagine potentially for anyone who channels or seeks to channel is the sort of like the giving away of one's own development and discovery of one's own answers, most of which we all have. So even if we relegate our answers and solutions as being outside of ourselves and belonging to someone else, then in a way we're depriving ourselves of developing that capacity. So it's wonderful that you also channel and speak about channeling your own inner wisdom and higher wisdom. How do you balance those two, seeking answers from your guides versus from your own soul as guide as well?
Well, I feel like, we're all one consciousness, basically. I mean, we truly are. Now, one of the, let me just segue here with Dr. Peoples. One of the things that I love is that, it should be empowering to somebody, not doing the work for them, right? But empowering them and hopefully inspiring them to take a peek or to work with the journey a little bit more consciously. Now, one of the ways that he does that, he has 3 principles, which I'll share with you now. The first one is loving allowance for all things to be in their own time and place, starting with yourself. The second one is increased communication with respect to all life, starting with yourself. And the third is self-responsibility for your life as a creative adventure. Or never in your soul are you the victim, you're always a creator. So one of the things that he gives, if any of your audience is going through a difficult time, here's one of the tools that he shares. Write about how it has served you and how has the experience helped you grow. How has it helped me grow? And he said, you'll glean the gems from that. And once you do that, you'll own the experience and it won't own you.
Yes, wonderful.
Okay. And so that's one of the ways. So he works very much with people in that light. Now, with my God self, my I am presence, I consciously work with that through meditation, usually daily, not always, but most of the time daily. And then I make that connection inwardly. And then there are affirmations that I will say. And I mean, here's one that is, I think is such a beautiful one is, I am presence. Now the I am that I am within, okay, is now listening. We have to do that through our free will, because the biggest misconception is that that presence is going to interfere. And that's not going to happen because we were given free will. So we have the gift to send that energy out any which way we want. So what we're seeing again in the world is the havoc of not creating through those divine principles. So here's one. I'll say, I am presence. Go forth before me today and see that I act in divine order. Enfold each and every one I come into contact with light and with love. And bring to each soul whatever it takes to set them free. Okay?
Beautiful.
So there it goes. The light goes out and just, and that's, there's, those books are just filled with so many of those affirmations. But it's like, Saint Germain says, you've got to know where your presence is and how to anchor to it. Otherwise, your human self is going to swing back and forth, and it's going to swing to the negative, because that's the path, really of least resistance.
Right. So the 3 Saint Germain books that you were gifted and that you've referenced a few times, are those still available today, such as on Amazon?
Oh my gosh, yes. Let me give those to you nice and slow, and I will say it nice and slow.
Right. We'll link them in the show notes.
Yes.
Pardon?
We'll link them in the show notes so that people can check them out.
Yeah, okay. So the first one you want to make, yes, thank you very much. That's wonderful, because they'll get a lot of that in there too. And incidentally, this all transpired in Mount Shasta. I'm only an hour and 45 minutes from Mount Shasta.
Fantastic. We have one in our community who lives in Mount Shasta.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jane Seeley. I don't know if you know Jane Seeley. She has a wonderful garden, and she's a resident.
Wow.
There.
Oh, how wonderful. Yeah, no, so it's pretty mystical. That's where Saint Germain appeared to Godfrey Ray King who was the channel for this information. Now, I do want to say something here that didn't come through him that way. It was a whole different experience with Godfrey Ray King. Okay, so the first book is called The Original Unveiled Mysteries. The Original Unveiled Mysteries. This is where he appears to Godfrey Ray King on Mount Shasta. Volume 2 is called The Magic Presence, which is really your I Am Presence, the Magic Presence. And then the third one, Volume 3, is called the I Am Discourses by the Ascended Master Saint Germain. Now, Saint Germain is instructing from the very first. Okay, so this whole series is called the I Am series, but there's 20 books, so you want to make sure that it's, if they're starting at 1, 2, and 3, Volume 3 on that.
Okay.
And, people can always contact me and, can, if there's questions, things like that.
Well, speaking of that, so wow, I didn't realize the time was flying. So, and
Yes.
I love your book title and the cover, Walking Between Worlds, A Spiritual Odyssey. It came incredible cover.
Oh, thank you.
Wonderful title, and it just came out this year, April. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So we would like to, if we can take maybe another 5 to 10 minutes. If you
Sure.
have.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so we want to hear about how you decided to write the book and your process and journey.
And it took you 20 years.
20 years writing the book.
No.
And then also about your workshops. So
Okay, it took me longer than 20.
oh wow.
Okay. So what had transpired, and FYI, because the healing was such a huge part in the book, that is in there as well. And one of the things I do want to say is that when Dr. Slavin would put me under, I would go sometimes spontaneously to other lives on my own. And I went to before I was born and saw my lifetime and these masters talking to me about the life I was going into. So that's in there as well. Okay, so let me ask the question again. I'm sorry. What was the initial question?
So the initial question was just your journey of writing your book and deciding.
Oh, of course. Okay, here we go. Dr. Peebles was the one. That was my very first question to him, 1982, because I had been feeling nudged to write, and I had started to write. And I remember my first question to him was, "Hi, Dr. Peebles, my name is Athena, and I'm feeling the desire to write." And he interrupted me. He said, "This is a channeling state, which has already begun." And he said, "We encourage you to write about your own growth in life personally. This will prepare you for the channeling you'll be doing towards the end of the decade after confrontation of change," which happened right on schedule. And so that was it. And because my experiences have been so vast in nature, and I think probably one of the hardest things for any writer is to strip yourself naked. And I really, I'm just up there, so naked. It's so raw, and it's so honest, and it's so gut level honest with the rage, the anger, everything I went through in that journey. I don't make anything more than what it was. It just is what it is in there. And that was the challenge. What would people think? And I had written a certain amount, tucked it away, and then I remember I was in a mall in Los Angeles, and a complete stranger walked up to me and shook her finger in my face. Beautiful woman. She was probably maybe 60, 65. And she goes like this to me, and she says, "Your life may very well become a film and a TV movie of the week. You need to be writing. You could be helping millions of women."
Wow.
She was a clairvoyant, a very well-known clairvoyant, unbeknownst to me at that time. And it wasn't the TV movie and all of that of the week, because it's never been the fame about that for me. It's not what moves my heart. But I thought, okay, how would I feel if I died tomorrow and I didn't do this? And I knew in my heart I would be backing out of fear. So that's just when I said, "Out of hell with it." and I pop the cork and let it rip, just let it flow. And then it's been mystical ever since. It's just been a complete mystical journey with that ever since. And my deepest prayer has always been, just use this in the most powerful way possible, God, to bless people and to help them. That's my prayer with it.
Well, once you made that decision to like really release the book and finish it, was that another layer of healing for you?
Well, it feels like such a level of accomplishment, and it's also available in Audible.
Nice.
You know, and that was like 6 years in the making on Audible. This was Walking Between Worlds was a complete re-edit with some content taken out of one that I had done originally. So this is the polished stone. We'll put it that way. This is the one, and then I'll be doing another book with some about UFOs and contacts. That's been another part of my journey. Yeah, I know. Yeah, people really love that one. That was my journey, but it was too much for this book. So that'll be that will be the next one. But,
yeah, it's great to hear you're planning a next one. And along the lines of Devani's question about healing from writing it, and what came to mind for me is we have there's a member of our community, Shannon Billings, who is working on her own memoirs, and in observing her journey. And there's another member, I think Kathleen Raby, is working on sort of fictionalizing, like a fictionalized version of her life story. But what we've observed in that is that a lot of it is writing one's memoirs or a story around one's life, whether it's actual, stark truth or a fictionalized version, is in large measure sort of a discovery of oneself. It's like a journey into oneself. It's almost like, I guess for writers, a lot of times we don't know what we think sometimes until we write it down, and then we get to know our thoughts better. So is that part of your experience?
Yeah, I would say in some ways, but when I would sit down and write, I just kind of like write to myself.
Yes.
And so it just, it definitely flows. I sure understand that journey that most writers go on, and that's the fear of what will people think. That's the biggest block, I think, to get over. But the success, and I remember Dr. Peebles telling me this, and I would share this with any writer. He said, you're going to know the success when you let it be raw. Let it be raw. He said, people like to pull back the curtain and look. They like to look into closets, So all my closets are wide open and everything, so, but I just knew that was a challenge. And the biggest challenge for me, was the vulnerability, because to let somebody see those flaws that you can hardly look at yourself, within yourself, or that illusion of the need to be perfect or the pleasing, or it's just all of the stuff, all of that. Yeah, that really helped. And when people, I mean, God, the emails and the letters I get are just phenomenal, and they just say they pick it up, they cannot put it down.
Yeah, wonderful.
And they just relate. So it's just the vulnerability for me has been the biggest thing, because that's always been the biggest fear.
Yeah.
For others listening to this who are, maybe scared to put their work out there, whatever it might be, do you have a daily affirmation during your writing process, or is there any advice?
Oh, if there's some of them that are wanting to go down that journey, I can tell you right now, I have, I can certainly turn them on to a few wonderful people that would be in their corner. And I just think it's the publisher that I have. She Writes Press. Don't you love that? She Writes Press. And they are so supportive of women writers.
Good. That's
just just incredible.
Well,
so I get that part of the journey, but I would just say, just write. And the other thing is don't worry about every single word being perfect. Just write it. All of that can come later on down the road in the editing process.
Yeah.
Don't stop the flow.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah, totally.
definitely. So, do you mind sharing the age you are for publishing your first book?
Oh my God, no. Well, let's see. I am now 72, 73 in January, in
Wow.
January. And very, I feel at this stage of my life, I want to embrace and engage this part of my journey.
Yeah.
It's just that I don't, about getting nipped and tucked and pulled and this and that. It's just like, my body's morphing into other things,
Yeah.
but hey, it is what it is.
Right.
And I just think there's a beauty in wisdom.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely.
And to be able to own that. So I just hope I turn into some great old eccentric sage.
There you go. Well, you're
Amazing.
you're manifesting it by saying that you are and you want that, right? And you're making
I just want to be conscious at this stage and not wanting to, God, I wished I was, 30 or 35 or,
yeah.
Now you couldn't pay me to go back because
Yeah.
it's taken me a long time to get comfortable in my own skin.
And the
Yeah.
world, we have many people in our audience who are 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, beyond, and the world needs that wisdom. So it's so wonderful when we see people of all ages, including boomers and seniors, taking that leap and moving beyond the comfort zone of just happily retired to, the extra effort required to begin to share your journey, share your wisdom.
Or you walk slower, you move slower, and it's just, it's all part of it.
It
but
is.
And I love Ram Dass.
Yes.
And he has an incredible, he's got incredible books, but also Audible on conscious aging. Conscious aging change. I think it's conscious aging change. And I'm not sure if it's dying, conscious aging, change, and dying. I want to be just conscious.
Yes.
That part of it, it's just, it's just everything that goes on with the body. Now, workshops, yes. Okay. And I'm going to be doing something here, probably, with Zoom, more on some of the IM. Because there's a group that I work with now. And so we're going to start working with technology to start doing that. And then teaching some connecting up with your higher self, some of those workshops as well.
Fantastic, which they can find out about on your website. You have a section where they can click on and opt in, I think, to be informed of what you have going.
And they can contact me. They can just send me, if they want, or any of your writers out there, they don't have to be shy.
Yes.
For sure, because I'd love to be able to, if people sometimes want a little point in the direction, I'm happy to do that.
Well, but speaking of that, what kind of people do you typically work with? Like, in other words, someone who's looking for what is the kind of person?
Well, usually when people call or people contact me, as a rule, because they're at a point that there's just a lot going on in their life, and half the time when people, they may feel as if they're in the black hole, right? A lot going on. Well, this is why I love Dr. Peebles. He said the black hole from Spirit's point of view is the point of creation. So so it's, they're resurrecting, and, that they're going to come through it. Okay, so let's see how it's helping you grow. And then there's always perspectives. But it's not, the nature of the work that I do is not psychic prediction. It's very much empowerment, to get people anchored inwardly to their own power and to begin to work with that in a conscious way that, takes root and begins to expand. So that's what I really love to do. Okay. And so I do workshops with Dr. Peebles. I do that. And then I also do those with connecting peoples with the people with the I am within them.
Okay.
And that pretty much came up organically. They were, how did you learn about this? Would you teach it? I said, well, if you guys will show up, I'll make the commitment.
Yeah.
So that was it. I'll
Yeah.
make the commitment to do it if you show up. And, they have. But it's wonderful to, oh my gosh, to see the expansion of the light. And it's all about expanding the light.
Yes, absolutely.
It's all about expanding the light. And then people feel their own inner strength, their own connection. And what I have found working with this information, and I can tell your audience, if the key lies in your application.
Yeah.
Lies in the application. Because if you just read it and set it aside, that's okay too. May not be time, but if you're one of those that really feels drawn to it, the key lies in the application.
Definitely.
And he will work, and he'll work with you on a very personal way, your presence. And so people that are drawn to that are it's the doorbell ringing, they're being awakened.
Definitely. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
we loved this time with you.
Oh,
And
thank you.
And yes, is there anything you would like to share? We've talked about your site names and links, and we'll definitely link to that. Do you have any final advice for creators?
Final advice. For me, it's just, I always just like to say that, the presence that is beating your heart, that is giving you the ability to think and to move, and is your consciousness, is the presence of God within you. That's the presence. That's who you really are. And so everything else that is a shadow or an illusion is created by the human self that always wants to take the power as its own. That's why it always creates the havoc. But that still small voice inside your heart is the one that is going to lead you down the correct path. The challenge is to take your attention, anchor it there, so that still small voice becomes the larger voice. And with your continued application, this is what happens. Your light expands. Every single affirmation that you make, I am the perfect solution to this problem, releases a volume of light. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
Each one releases a volume of light, and then that presence of who you are, truly who you are, that one consciousness, grows. Because your human self, by your free will, is becoming more subservient, because you're placing your attention to the only source, because as long as you look outwardly for your answers, you will never find them, because it doesn't come from your exterior world. Your exterior world is everything that we have created through thought and feeling. And it's like Saint Germain says, it's like shifting sand. So the only place where there is any stability, it's almost like your interior of strength and wisdom and consciousness and kindness, caring, compassion, love, generosity, every one of those beautiful qualities that we all have, that's the presence of God within you. That's who you really are. Yeah. So everything else is just the human self, the garbage, the judging, the critical, I'm not enough, everything that creates lack and limitation is created through the human self taking that energy and distorting it. So your evolution, or the evolving, and I was looking at the word love,
yes,
add a VE on it, or if you do it backwards and add a EV on it, it's evolve. And the more we love, the more we evolve. The more we evolve, the more we love.
Yes, wonderful.
Okay? So your consciousness will, and it will pull you. It really does. And another thing I just want to say here is that there are so many wonderful ascended masters, and this is the thing that's so beautiful. He said each one of us eventually one day finds our way back to that source through making that connection. And there's the angelic realm, there's the cosmic beings, there are people that have made their ascension. Each one of us has the same capacity to raise the body like Christ did.
Yes.
In this embodiment, and they work with you. And that was why the statements that he made that had, I can do nothing but then the I am who doeth the work. He was just able to completely let his human self, go where, in other words, so his presence was able to flow through. So beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. It's such a beautiful message and really so simple. To love is to evolve, and to evolve is to love more. So
that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Athena Demetrios. Thank you so much for your time and sharing this with our audience. And we look forward to sharing your book and your interview, our conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And just have, if I don't talk to you again, I'm sure on some level we will, but it's been a blessing,
Same here.
to talk
Thank
to
you
you.
so
And
much.
thank you for the good work that you do out there.
Thank you, Athena.
Let your
Bye-bye.
light. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining us for the I Create Daily podcast. Please let us know what creatives you would like us to interview and what topics you would be interested in hearing more about.
And if you enjoyed this show, please leave a review on iTunes. We value your feedback. We read all the reviews, and it just helps us get the word out on the I Create Daily podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.